The summer of 2023 was meant to be a denouement, a final, triumphant chapter in the often troubled romantic history of my younger brother Tyle. I am Audrey Lockwood, and at 55, I had played the role of supportive older sister through more than one of his heartbreaks. The flighty artist who saw his kindness as a weakness, the ambitious lawyer who saw his affection as a distraction. So, as I stood on the sun-drenched flagstone terrace of Whisperwind Manor, a glass of champagne cool in my hand, my heart felt a profound sense of peace. This, finally, was it. This was his victory. The manor itself, a bastion of old-world stone and ivy, seemed to exhale a sigh of contentment. It was a place built on the quiet confidence of old money, its history steeped in generations of Lockwoods. Today, it was the perfect stage for what felt like a coronation. The air was a symphony of scent, the sweet, almost narcotic perfume of 1,000 blooming hydrangeas mingling with the crisp, green smell of freshly cut grass. My parents, Grace Ilara, 75, and the epitome of matriarchal elegance, and Thomas Silas, 78, and a titan of industry, still convinced he was at the height of his powers, moved through the crowd like benevolent royalty. Their pride was a tangible thing, a warm light that seemed to soften the edges of the world. And at the very center of this perfect universe was Vivian Sterling. She was not merely a bride, she was an event. To say she was beautiful was to describe a hurricane as windy. Her allure was a complex, masterfully woven tapestry of intelligence, grace, and an almost psychic ability to be exactly what each person needed her to be. I had watched her, fascinated, for months. I saw her discuss 18th century poetry with my mother, then pivot to dissecting complex financial derivatives with my father. That afternoon, I witnessed a masterclass. She was standing with Silas near the ancient oak tree. She didn't open with flattery. She began by mentioning a small, almost forgotten philanthropic initiative he had started decades ago. The Lockwood Literacy Fund, she'd said, her voice soft with admiration. It was so forward-thinking, Silas. To understand that investing in human capital was the ultimate long-term growth strategy long before it became a popular concept. My father, a man who rarely spoke of that project, was visibly taken aback, and then deeply pleased. He felt seen. Only then, having completely disarmed him, did she pivot. In a way, she continued seamlessly, it's the same principle you applied in the Apex acquisition. Leveraging their intellectual property was a masterstroke. Most analysts saw only the debt. He beamed, his booming laugh echoing across the lawn. He put a proprietary arm around her shoulders. You see, he said to a nearby business associate, brilliance, absolute brilliance. But my husband of 32 years, Michael, was watching from the periphery, his expression unreadable. Later, as the evening light softened to a warm lavender, he found me by the reflecting pool. Did you see how she mirrored your father's posture when he was talking? He asked quietly. The hand gestures, the slight lean forward. It's textbook rapport building. Unconscious for most people. For her, I suspect, it's a tool. Or, I countered, a touch of irritation in my voice, she's simply an engaging young woman who respects her new father-in-law. Michael, please, look at Tyle. I gestured to where my brother stood, watching his new wife from across the lawn, his face a study in pure, unadulterated adoration. This is his day. Can't we just let it be perfect? Michael met my gaze, his own eyes, a keen and thoughtful gray, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't anger, but a deep, sorrowful concern. I hope you're right, Audrey, he said, his voice so low I could barely hear it. His words were a quiet, unsettling counterpoint to the day's joyful symphony, a single discordant note I chose, deliberately, to ignore. The following morning, the manor's grand dining room was filled with the lazy, contented buzz of the post-wedding brunch. The scent of coffee and baked goods mingled with the lingering perfume of last night's flowers. My mother was telling a funny story about Kyle as a boy, and Silas was boasting to anyone who would listen about his brilliant new daughter-in-law. It was a perfect domestic scene, a snapshot of familial bliss. It was the last moment of peace we would know for a very long time. Michael's hand covered mine on the white linen tablecloth. It was as cold as marble. "We need to go," he whispered, the words a stark, urgent command that cut through the cheerful din. "Now." "Michael, what is it? You're frightening me," I managed, my heart beginning a low, anxious thrum. His eyes were not on me. They were fixed, like a hawk's, on Vivian, who was laughing elegantly at something my mother had said. "She's not who she says she is, Audrey," he repeated, his voice harder now, insistent. "Not even close." The world seemed to tilt and drain of color. The drive home was a surreal journey through a landscape that had become alien. The sun-drenched hills and winding roads of Aurelian Falls, usually a source of comfort, now seemed menacing, every shadow a potential threat. My mind was a frantic whirlwind, a desperate attempt to reconcile my faith in Michael's unerring judgment with the sheer, monstrous absurdity of his accusation. I replayed every interaction with Vivian, every smile, every shared confidence, searching for a hint of the duplicity Michael saw. I found nothing but my own foolishness. The moment we entered the echoing silence of our home, he led me straight to his study. The room, my husband's sanctuary of order and logic, felt charged, like the air before a lightning strike. "I've been digging since the day they got engaged," he confessed, his face pale in the stark blue light of his monitor. Something about her story felt manufactured. The prep school she claimed to attend had no record of her. The family fortune she alluded to is a ghost. The web of her life had no tangible threads. He gestured for me to sit. "I need you to see this. You need to understand the scale of what we're facing." He pulled up a file, and the world I knew ceased to exist. "Her name isn't Vivian Sterling," he stated, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "That is a meticulously crafted fiction." A gallery of ghosts flickered across the screen. There was Isabelle Dubois, a demure, bespectacled philanthropist from Boston. Michael had found articles about her, and I remembered Vivian once mentioning a passion for charity work. There was Clara Johansson, a sharp, confident venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. I recalled Vivian dissecting a tech IPO with my father. There was Sophia Ricci, an art historian in Florence. Vivian had once identified a minor Renaissance painting in our home. She had been seeding her conversations with us for months, testing her past identities, weaving them into the fabric of her current one. The faces in the photos were all subtly different, but the eyes were the same. They were the cold, empty eyes of a woman whose real name appeared to be Seraphina Vale. The dossier Michael had compiled was a digital graveyard of ruined lives and plundered fortunes. "She is a student of human nature, Audrey," Michael explained, his voice heavy with a grim certainty. "A predator who studies her prey. She knew Silas's pride in his own business acumen was his greatest vulnerability, so she became the ultimate validation of his genius. She knew Kyle's romantic, trusting heart made him the perfect key to unlock our family's gates. His wedding wasn't a sacrament of love for her, it was the final stage of a hostile takeover." Then he delivered the coup de grace, bringing up a screen filled with elegant, incomprehensible code. "This," he said, pointing to a file she had named Lockwood Family Portfolio Optimizer version 2.0, "is the accounting software she so helpfully installed on your father's computer in the solarium study 2 weeks ago." He explained it wasn't software, it was a digital parasite, a Trojan horse of breathtaking sophistication. "It's a logic bomb, Audrey. It's been silently learning his habits, his digital fingerprints, the very rhythm of his financial life, all to build a perfect digital mimic of him. It's programmed to activate on a specific date, 3 days from now, when Kyle and she are supposedly on their honeymoon. It will then begin systematically transferring his entire fortune, every stock, every bond, every liquid asset, into a web of untraceable offshore accounts. The transfers will look like they were made by Silas himself. By the time anyone unravels it, she'll be a ghost, and your father will be left with nothing but public humiliation and financial ruin. A wave of nausea and vertigo washed over me. I gripped the arms of the chair, the polished leather cool against my skin. This wasn't just a con. It was a premeditated assassination of my father's entire life's work, and she had used my brother's gentle, loving heart as the trigger. The shock receded, replaced by a cold, diamond-hard rage. This creature, this Serafina Vale, would not win. Our first, most agonizing task was to bring Kyle into this nightmare. The thought of taking the perfect, shining happiness he finally possessed and smashing it to pieces on the floor felt like a betrayal in itself, but it was a necessary cruelty. He arrived for dinner that evening, utterly blissful, a bottle of vintage Barolo in hand. "From a small vineyard near where we're honeymooning," he announced, his face alight with a joy so pure it was painful to behold. "Vivian has the most amazing taste." The words were like acid. We sat him down in the living room, the air thick with an unspoken dread that was a suffocating presence in the room. "Kyle," Michael began, his voice direct and devoid of any gentle preamble, "there is no easy way to say this. The woman you married is not who you think she is. Her name is Serafina Vale, and she is a professional, high-level con artist." Kyle stared, a slow-motion reel of confusion playing across his features before it settled on a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "What are you talking about? Is this some kind of sick, twisted joke? Michael, I know you never fully warmed up to her, but this is a new low, even for you." He turned to me, his eyes wide and pleading, desperate for me to be his ally against this insanity. "Audrey, tell him he's being ridiculous. Tell him he's wrong." My heart fractured as I slowly shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "He's not being ridiculous, sweetheart. We wish to God he was." Kyle's denial became explosive, a cornered animal defending its mate. "You're wrong. Vivian is kind and brilliant, and she loves me. This is about you two. You've never thought anyone was good enough for me, and now that I found someone incredible, you're trying to sabotage it." Patiently, Michael handed him the tablet. "Look at the evidence, Kyle. Just look." It was like watching a building demolish in slow motion. He took the tablet, his hands trembling, his face a mask of defiant anger. He scrolled through the faces, his angry defiance slowly faltering. He read the summaries of her past cons, his posture beginning to slump. I could see the exact moment the truth began to penetrate his wall of denial. It was a photograph of Serafina as the brunette venture capitalist Clara John Hansen, standing on a balcony in Lake Como with another man, a handsome, older gentleman who was later financially ruined. And around her neck was a small, distinctive gold locket. It was the same locket she was wearing now, the one she had told Kyle was a family heirloom from her grandmother, the one he had so admired. A choked gasp escaped his lips. The tablet slipped from his numb fingers, clattering onto the Persian rug. He stumbled back as if struck, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a look of such utter devastation that it will haunt me for the rest of my days. He sank into a nearby armchair, his body seeming to collapse in on itself. He didn't speak. He just stared into the middle distance, at the ruins of his life. "How?" he finally whispered, his voice a ragged, broken thing. "How could I have been so blind, so stupid?" "You were not stupid," I insisted, my own voice thick with tears as I knelt by his chair. "You were loving and trusting. That is your gift, Kyle. It is not a flaw. She is a monster who feeds on the goodness of others. This is not your failure. It is her evil. He looked up at me, his eyes a swirling vortex of pain, humiliation, and dawning fury. The heartbreak was a chasm in his soul, but I could see something else being forged in that fire, the unbreakable steel of Lockwood resolve. He was shattered, but he was not broken. He was with us. The next 48 hours were a blur of quiet, grim purpose. Our house became a command center, a fragile, unspoken pact formed between the three of us. We would protect our family no matter the cost. Michael, in his element, orchestrated our counterattack with the precision of a master strategist. He was in constant, secure communication with Ethan Vance, the cybersecurity expert, whose disembodied voice on the speakerphone was our guide through the digital minefield. The malware is dormant but active, Ethan explained, his voice a calm, crackling presence. It's waiting for a specific date and time to execute. It also has a dead man switch. Any unusual attempt to access or remove it from an unauthorized terminal will trigger the payload immediately. Your window is narrow. The neutralization has to happen on the target computer, and it has to be flawless. Our plan began to coalesce around the Solarium study. Kyle, now a crucial part of our Council of War, his face pale but his eyes sharp with a new, cold purpose, provided the key. His intimate knowledge of Vivian was now our greatest asset. "She has a tell," he said, his voice flat. "When she's about to tell a significant lie, she tucks a strand of hair behind her left ear. She thinks it makes her look thoughtful." He also confirmed the meeting. She called it a final review of the family investment strategy she developed. She insisted it had to be just her and Dad for privacy. It was the perfect pretense, a trap of her own making that we would now spring on her. Michael went to work. With the stealth of a cat burglar, he installed a series of tiny motion-activated cameras in the study, their lenses nearly invisible among the books and artifacts. Ethan prepared the encrypted flash drive, our digital silver bullet. Just as our plan was solidifying, we got the final piece we needed. Michael's network had traced one of Serafina's aliases to a private P.O. box in a small town 3 hours away. A trusted associate, a former federal agent, was dispatched. Late that night, Michael's encrypted phone buzzed. He opened the message, and his face hardened into granite. He turned the screen to me. It was a photograph of the contents of a freshly delivered package, Serafina's escape kit. A collection of high-end, untraceable burner phones, multiple passports with new, expertly crafted identities, and a one-way, first-class flight itinerary to Belize scheduled for 2 days from now. It was our smoking gun. The following afternoon, the house was unnervingly quiet, charged with an electric, unspoken tension. I found myself holding my breath, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Silas, blissfully unaware and prompted by a carefully worded suggestion from Kyle about Vivian's brilliant but complex proposal, had invited her to the study for their private financial discussion. He was excited, proud to be sharing his world with his brilliant new daughter-in-law. This dramatic irony was a tragedy in its own right. Michael, dressed in dark clothes, had slipped into the room minutes before her arrival, concealing himself in a small, shadowed alcove near the mahogany desk. Kyle and I waited in the living room, a silent two-person army, our nerves stretched to the breaking point. We heard the chime of the front door, and then her voice, a melody of bright confidence, echoed in the marble foyer. "Silas, darling, I'm so glad we're doing this. I have projections that are going to absolutely thrill you." The sound of her voice, once so charming, now felt grotesque. We heard the heavy oak door of the study close. Then, after a moment that stretched for an eternity, we heard Michael's voice, calm, clear, and resonant. "Vivian, there's something we need to discuss." He called for us to join them. This was the signal. We walked into a tableau of frozen tension. Silas was seated behind his grand desk, a look of utter bewilderment on his face. Serafina stood opposite him, a stack of meticulously prepared documents in her hand, her captivating green eyes narrowed, darting between Michael, Kyle, and me. The predator was sensing a trap. "What is the meaning of this, Michael?" she asked, her voice losing its cultivated softness, a flicker of sharp irritation breaking through her polished veneer. Kyle stepped forward, his face a mask of grief and cold anger. He held up the tablet, the screen illuminated with her gallery of past identities. "Do these names sound familiar, Serafina?" he asked, his voice raw with a pain that was almost palpable. Her mask didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The warmth, the grace, the entire persona of Vivian Sterling evaporated in an instant. What was left was something cold, hard, and reptilian. A chillingly cynical smile touched her lips. "I see," she said, her voice now crisp and sharp, the polished American accent gone, replaced by a distinct, unplaceable European lilt. "So, the clever little family has figured it out. A pity. I was rather enjoying this role." She turned her cold gaze on each of us, her arrogance breathtaking. To Silas, "You were so desperate to be seen as a genius in your twilight years, you never considered you could be a mark." To me, "And you, the matriarch, so busy tending to everyone else's happiness, you couldn't see the fox in your own henhouse." And finally to Kyle, her voice dripping with a cruel, condescending pity, "And you, your capacity for love is just a gaping void waiting to be filled. It was the easiest thing in the world to fill it with a beautiful lie." As she spoke, drunk on her own perceived victory, she was distracted. Michael's fingers, steady and sure, flew. He slid the encrypted flash drive into a discreet USB port on the computer tower. The screen flickered with lines of code. Serafina saw the movement, her eyes widening in horror as she realized what was happening. Her composure finally shattered. "No!" she shrieked, the sound feral and desperate as she lunged for the desk. "That's mine! I earned that!" But Kyle, no longer the gentle victim, but a man fueled by a raw cry of pain and righteous fury, moved faster. He threw himself in her path, a human shield between the monster and her prize. The move was less a block and more of a desperate tackle, sending a small table lamp crashing to the floor. That single chaotic moment was all Michael needed. A small progress bar on the monitor filled instantly. "Done," Michael announced, his voice cutting through the tension as he pulled the drive out with a final satisfying click. "Spyware neutralized, all assets secured. A complete forensic copy of your every move has been made." "You have nothing," she hissed, her face contorted in a mask of primal fury, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape. "No proof that will stand up in court." "We have your escape kit," Michael said calmly, holding up the intercepted package from the P.O. box. "And we have your full confession," I added, my voice as cold as ice as I gestured to the tiny, almost invisible camera lens on the bookshelf. Her gaze darted to the camera, and for the first time I saw genuine, unadulterated fear in her eyes. The realization that she was not just thwarted, but caught, exposed, and trapped broke the last of her control. She let out a guttural scream of pure animalistic rage and lunged for the door. As she burst from the study, she was met by two of Michael's security contacts, who apprehended her calmly and efficiently, her furious curses about our stupidity and her brilliance echoing in the hall until she was gone. In the aftermath, a profound, echoing silence descended upon our home. The study was a mess, the air thick with the smell of ozone and betrayal. Silas sat slumped in his chair, staring at the now innocuous computer screen, the full weight of the deception finally landing on him. He didn't rage, he simply began to weep, quiet, racking sobs of a proud man confronting his own foolishness. My mother, Grace, entered the room, took in the scene with a single sweeping glance, and went to her husband. She stood behind him, her hands on his trembling shoulders, saying nothing but offering everything. The weeks that followed were a fragile, painful time. The legal battle was a distant, humming machine, handled by Michael and a team of lawyers. Our battle was internal. Kyle retreated into a profound depression, a ghost haunting the halls of our home. He started therapy, but the sessions were raw, difficult ordeals. "How do I ever trust my own judgment, Audrey?" he asked me one night, his voice hollow. My heart led me and our whole family to the edge of a cliff. The healing began, as it often does, in small, unexpected ways. 6 months after the incident, Kyle, on the advice of his therapist, began volunteering at a local animal shelter. It was there, in the simple, unconditional, and honest affection of abandoned dogs and cats, that he began to rediscover the meaning of trust. He found solace in caring for beings whose love came without an agenda, whose wagging tails and grateful purrs were not part of a larger, sinister transaction. My father, in a display of profound humility, fully engaged Michael in fortifying the family's entire life, from digital security to personal investments. The project gave him a new purpose, and in the process, he and Michael forged an unlikely, powerful bond built on a foundation of mutual respect. A year and a half after that terrible summer, we were all gathered for a quiet family dinner. The scars were still there, invisible but present, but the atmosphere was different. It was calmer, more honest. Kyle mentioned, almost casually, that he'd had coffee with a fellow volunteer from the shelter. "It was nice," he said, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in a long time. It wasn't a romance, but it was a seed of normalcy, a hint of a future he was beginning to believe in again. Later that evening, Silas raised a glass. He didn't toast to success or fortune, he toasted to resilience. I looked across the table at Michael, my partner of more than 3 decades, the quiet anchor who had seen the storm coming and steered us through it. We shared a look of silent understanding. We had faced the darkness in its most charming and insidious form. We had lost our innocence, but had found a deeper, more profound strength. We had learned the true meaning of wealth, and it had nothing to do with the numbers in a bank account. It was in the quiet, unbreakable bonds of a family that had been tested by fire and had refused to burn.